From battlefield to bomb shelter, from home front to hospital, from volunteer rosters to victims lists, women experience war in distinctive, gendered ways. These are their stories. These are their voices. Welcome to Voices of Women at Wartime, a podcast by the Center for Women's Justice. I'm Rachel Stomel.
And I'm Rivka Lubich. Rachel, before we get into today's very important episode, I'd like to say a few words about Dr. Kochav El-Kayam Levi, who we interviewed for the second episode on the Voices of Women at Wartime. Kochav, as our listeners already heard, is an expert on international law and gender and human rights issues, had founded immediately after October 7th a group of experts to study, collect data, and speak about the gendered atrocities that were committed by Hamas. She has spoken at the UN and on every other possible platform, together with other experts, trying to get recognition on this issue. And I'm happy to say that it is making a change, maybe a little and too late, but something is happening. 2 months after the attack, the UN Women finally condemned the Hamas's use of gender-based violence. So I just wanted to say that I strongly recommend to our listeners to go back to episode number 2 and listen if you haven't yet heard Kochav talking about it, and send to people who need to hear these things. We actually intend to address the topic more in later episodes to find out what is being done in terms of collecting evidence. And now to you, Rachel, on today's topic.
Okay, thanks. So today we're going to be talking about an extremely important topic, which is the issue of gun licensing in Israel and the loosening of the process of obtaining a gun since October 7th. Traditionally, Israel's standards for getting a gun license have been relatively rigorous. Like, you have to meet a certain level of proficiency and training. There's background checks. There's mental and physical health requirements. You have to prove a security need for getting a gun. Not just anyone can say, I want one, and then they'll give it to you. You have to be able to store it properly and all these other criteria that you have to show. So unlike in the US, where much of the debate around guns relates to the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, in Israel, there's no such automatic right to have a gun. Gun licensing and approval is entirely a question of security. So since October 7th and the start of the war, understandably, there's been a lot of talk about the need for more protection. And that has led to a huge surge in people applying for gun permits. So in the last 2 months alone, since the start of the war, there were about 255,000 new applications. The biggest proponent of loosening gun regulations now and accelerating the process has been our national security minister, Tamar Ben-Gvir. So his office has appointed hundreds of new officials to vet and approve gun licenses. And this fast tracking of the process has been really inadequate, for lack of a better word. The new licensing officials were given only 1 day of training. Many of them were chosen from among Ben-Gvir's own staff members. From Sharut Leumi girls, these are girls who are doing their national service. They're about 17, 18, 19 years old, which, by the way, isn't even old enough to own a weapon themselves. And others who basically skipped the entire training process, but are now approving thousands of gun permits for other people. Ben-Gvir and others have justified this by saying that security needs are so acute right now that we have to get as many guns into as many hands as we can, as fast as we can. But some people are less enthused about how this is going. So recently, the head of the National Security Ministry's Firearms Division, Yisrael Avisar, actually resigned over the new policies. And women's organizations have been increasingly vocal about the effect these policies have had and will have on the private sphere, specifically on women, on domestic violence, on suicides. Today, we're speaking with social worker Tamar Schwartz, who is the executive director of Ruach Nashit, or Women's Spirit. That's an Israeli NGO that works for the economic empowerment of women survivors of violence in Israel. They strive for social change from a feminist perspective and a commitment to social and gender justice. So Tamar has been outspoken about this issue and will share some insights with us about how this affects women, why this matters now, and what we need to be considering when we talk about gun licensing regulations. So hi, Tamar.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for your kind words.
Okay, so first we actually want to hear a little bit about the organization, Ruach Nashit, Women's Spirit, and then we'll go into talking about the guns issue.
I will gladly elaborate on Women's Spirit and also about the gender lens to look at the feminine angle in the war, because not all the people are affected by the war the same. But first, a few general words about Women Spirit. It's an NGO. It operates from 2007, so it's 16 years. I'm privileged to be the CEO for the last 8.5 years. And this NGO deals with an area that nobody else is dealing with, because women who are victims of violence in Israel are being treated in two ways. Or they have to run for their life, so they are being taken to shelters, or they get psychotherapy in centers for fighting violence. There are 170 centers like this all over Israel. But all is psychotherapy. The problem begin in the day after, when she decide, okay, I divorced this husband. He won't be cured. He's not going to therapy. He's violent. I want to leave the house. Okay, and now she's going out, only with her shirt on. She doesn't have anything. You know it better than me. You deal with women in divorce process, and most of the cases, she wasn't allowed to go to work, or if she went to work, her husband controlled the bank account. This is economic violence, the area that we focus on. We get women from all kind of violence, yes, also physical, sexual, spiritual, emotional, all kind of violence, not only economic violence, but our response is economic rehabilitation, because if a woman is economic independent, she will not go back, zero. She will not go back to the violent husband. But if a woman is not economic independent, I will tell you a shocking data, 66%, most of them are going back to the violent husband. It's not logic to go back to the place where you were beaten. Yes, if you are not economic independent, you have no choice. You don't have what to eat. So what we do, we have a long process, 2.5 years. We give those women mentor, private. The process is long, individual, and intensive. Every week, mentor, she can get a coach, all volunteer, of course. She can get laptop, scholarship for study, financial advisor, everything to put her on her leg, that she know how to control her bank account. Most of them are very afraid to have their own bank account. And secondly, to have a profession which is good, is suitable, is according to her tendencies, to what she loves to do, not just for surviving, and that she can provide for herself in dignity. A good parnose, we say. So I want to now focus on what happened to women victim of violence in the war. Not everybody is affected by the war the same. If you are a woman victim of violence, you pay the price in any scenario that exists. Why? If she is still with the violent husband, she stay at home. You remember the first days, nobody got out of the home. Many were fired from work. They are together. Only being together is increasing the violence. We know it
Just like the corona, what happens?
Exactly. The corona, and I will add, not only corona, Sukkot, Passover. After holidays that are happy, just being together is increasing the violence. Add to this that you are afraid because it's a war. Add to this that many people were fired or put on unpaid holiday. And so it's an economic stress. So the violence got up. The first 2 weeks, we didn't get no call, but we were sure that it's not because there is no violence, but the women are afraid. But after 2 weeks, a flood of call. If he's not with her, he went to the army. You know, all the research all over the world, we know it. When men come back from fighting, they're
more aggressive.
They're more aggressive. They have violence in themselves. It's you cannot avoid it. I'm not blaming them. Of course, they suffer too.
They have to be treated in different ways also.
Exactly. And on whom they will put all the aggressive, of course, on the women and on the children. And maybe you think, okay, maybe if she's divorced or apart from the husband, her situation is better. The answer is no again. Why? Because if you remember, the first months, there were no educational frames. And what do you think? This husband is not taking the kids to him. She should stay with home with the kids. So even if her working place didn't let her go, didn't fire her, the working place will not pay her the October salary because she was at home with the kids. And some of them got it also to November. So they were really hurt by this war. And to add to all this, even if you are a woman victim of violence, have no kids, no problem, your husband is away from you, no threat, and you live in Hadera, okay? Hadera was out of the missile.
In the middle of the country.
I'm giving
no rockets falling on you.
Yes, the perfect condition. Even then, you will suffer more than a woman that is not victim of violence. Why? Because women victim of violence are post-traumatic. When they hear in the news all the time, and you know, we have news 24 hours now in the TV, in all the channels, in the radio, everywhere, it evokes the trauma. Even that her trauma is not connected to the war. It evokes it's trigger. So to conclude, to be a woman victim of violence in times of war, it's very, very bad and not pleasant, and you need an intensive help. That's what we did. We started to work really 24/7. I'm not talking about also working with abroad, you know, what you heard from Kochav. We were in it too. We went on Zoom with the UN. We wrote letters. Our friends, our feminist friends in the world ignore us, say suddenly approve that it happened. Yes, me too, unless I'm a Jew. It's horrible. I just want to say that in this period of war, we work more intensively than ever, like in the corona.
Sounds crazy. I want to get to the gun issue.
Yes. And now I will talk about the gun issue. Look, the gun issue, I know it from 2018. I was elected to be the only representative of the women organization in a special committee that established Gilad Ardan. Gilad Ardan was the Minister of Interior Security. He wanted to check how is the process of giving license for weapon. This was the mandate of this committee. With me in the committee, there were senior officers from the police and one professor that his specialty is in terror. So I was the only one who represent the interest of the women that are afraid from giving a lot of license to have weapon.
So you were the only woman there? I just want to make this clear.
No, I will surprise you. There was another woman there, a lawyer, a senior officer in the police.
And she wanted to give out weapons. Yeah, okay, I get it.
I would say that really I will be modest and say that luckily I was there to put this voice. And why? Not only because I'm from a women organization, but because I'm a social worker. The committee members didn't know about the welfare ministry and that there is a unit for fighting violence in the welfare ministry. And I'm not blaming them. They're from the police. They don't know those other parts of the government. I'm as a social worker, 35 years social worker, very proud in my profession. I know the welfare ministry. And also they didn't know that the National Security Institute has a list of the people that are mental ill. Why? Because they get budget from the government. You know, everybody that is acknowledged as mental ill, he gets a special allowance for this because he cannot work or he can work only half day and so forth.
Right. So we actually know who the people are that are mentally ill that shouldn't be carrying guns.
Exactly. That's why this is one group. The second group is men that are violent, that are being acknowledged by the authority. The welfare ministry know them. They are on the list of the violent men. They are being taken. They are having a treatment in the Ministry of Welfare. Now, the police said, if a woman is afraid, she should go and complain the police. Now, I live in my people. I know the woman. Most of the women victims of violence are not going to the police. They're afraid. May the reason be what they are. Okay, it should be changed. More women should go. Okay, but now let's be pragmatic. Women are hardly going to the police. So I'm not saying the policeman asked me in the committee, but what do we want? If she doesn't complain, how will we know that she's in danger? I say, okay, so take the reports, not from the woman. The woman is afraid to report. Take it from national security that has the list of mental ill. We all agree that mental ill shouldn't have gun, okay? This is going without conflict. Second, violent men shouldn't get a gun. This is also go without dispute. Okay. So I gave them the name. They invite to the committee someone from the national security and the chief inspector of fighting violence in the Ministry of Welfare that I work with daily. They both came and say, we are willing to give the information. You should ask, we will give. And guess what? In May 2018, we completed the work of the committee. It was 8 months work. A very, I'm just telling you a few recommendations. Of course, there were more. We checked the process and we saw that the process wasn't intensive enough. This is in 2018. If I will check the process now, it's nothing. There is no process. I will talk about it. But even then, it wasn't good enough. We present all the recommendation to the Minister Ardan. There was in the room 30 people, all the most senior officers in the Israeli police. And Ardan say, I accept all the recommendation and I now direct the police to implement the recommendation. I was very happy. I had a lot of hope. But guess what? A minute after, Ardan was sent to New York. He is the ambassador in the UN in New York.
Right. And then we get Itamar Ben-Gvir instead of him.
No, before Itamar Ben-Gvir.
Before, okay,
Don't make reduction to the previous government.
Okay.
The government of change, it was called. Bar-Lev. Omer Bar-Lev was the minister of the interior security. I thought as he talked that he will be very, very open to hear what I have to say. And I talked to him a few times and he dismissed me. Really, ignore me.
So from what I understand, Bar-Lev kind of steamrolled over the recommendations for security reasons. This is usually what's used to flatten other concerns and to trump everything else. And so we're seeing that same thing now, that security is being used as a way to kind of dismiss any concerns that women have or women's organizations have about the effect on women. So can you tell us a bit about what's going on right now with the gun licensing, how security is being used in this way?
Yes, I will just correct you on a small point. Bar-Lev didn't dismiss me on security reason. Bar-Lev just say, talk with the office, talk with my office. He dismissed me with no reason, okay?
Bureaucracy.
I even don't want to give him the privilege of the doubt. No reason.
Oh, okay.
He gave me the feeling that I'm boring him. I'm sorry for my harsh word, but this is
it was just not a priority, that women's concerns are just not.
And one time I saw him accidentally in the Knesset, in our parliament, and I went to him and I said to him, and he looked at me like, a fly that came to him and is bothering him. But to say in contradiction to Bar-Lev that I had hope from him, when Ben-Gvir was appointed to this position, I immediately knew disaster is coming. Ben-Gvir, I would say, was something positive on him. He's steady. He's always the same. He's consistent. No surprise, no hope and no disappointment. He said from the beginning that he wanted to give more weapons. He said it. And then the war fell to his hands like an apple, like a mature apple. Why? Because now what Ben-Gvir is saying, people has to defend themselves. Now, I want to, just for a second, to stay on this sentence. People has to defend themselves. I'm not arguing this. You know, many people say to me, you don't know what is happening? Don't you see the terrorists are coming in the street? And until the police is coming, there are citizens that can shoot this terrorist in a second. Of course, I know it. I'm not closing my eyes. But I want to define the question in another manner. People has to defend themselves. Yes. Do you want all the people to get weapon? Do you want mental ill to get weapon? Do you want violent people to get weapon? Because from the literature, the professional literature from all over the world, we see that if you give more license, you reduce the tragic result of the terror attacks because, yes, citizens are killing the terrorists faster before the police come, but in a minor percentage. A very low number of this good result is happening. But on the other hand, the negative result of giving a lot of weapon is very, very high, of more husband or divorced men kill their wife or their ex-wife, more suicide, more accidents. Children are finding the weapon in the house and killing themselves or other member of the families by accident, horrible accident. And the fourth horrible result is shooting with no
reason at all.
Like in the States, that someone is coming to a school and shooting, or to a show and shooting, you know, mental. I'm sorry to say it, but we have a lot of people that are not balanced in their mind. If you give them weapon, it's horrible. And now, before you had to go through an interview, it canceled. Now you're calling, hello, I'm Tamar, I want a weapon. Okay. You know, it's like ordering from the super. You have only to bring a letter from the doctor. The doctor, you know, he doesn't meet you. He look at your file, look in the internet. It's okay. He gives you this in the application. The problem is that a lot of people got the mental ill allowance from national security, not through the usual doctor. They went to a private doctor. So the authorities don't know about them. The doctor that give them the permission that they are healthy, they don't know that they are ill.
Tamar, this was very interesting thing. So like you said, that there is this justifiable and real need for people to have more security, but we for sure can't do that at the expense of women and children and just general society. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Just to, leaving us with a message, something to think about.
Two things. First, I want to thank you very much for inviting me to this podcast. And it's very important that you deal with this angle. It's an angle that most people, I think now, are not looking. They are looking, I understand it, yes? They are looking on the soldiers, they are looking on the kidnap, and they are not, they less look at the people in the back. And in the back, there are people that are bleeding now. So thank you for putting a light on this backyard that is suffering a lot. The second thing I want to say, that even now the times are very, very hard. I insist on seeing the hope. I'm telling my workers, work is the cure for us. Thank God we have work, this important work. We work with women. And invest all the energy in this. Don't look television. Don't look at the horrors. Look half an hour in the end of the day. That's it. Don't look all the day. Loop. Just work and be meaningful. To be meaningful in this period of time, it's the cure. Like this, I see it. And also we say to our clients, go on with your process, with your rehabilitation process. Don't stop it because of the war. Because this is the cure.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, Tamar Schwartz. This was so important. I can't finish off without saying that my husband yesterday was drafted in Tzav Shmona, and he came home in the evening with a gun. And he's a grandfather already. So, and army clothes, and I'm not so happy with it, but he does have to do guard work in the place where we live. So all that comes. Last night I said to him, okay, I'm going to talk about you tomorrow in the podcast. Prior to this episode, we had interviewed Dr. Judy Melanek, a forensic medical expert who is very outspoken on the issue of guns, and this is what she said to us on the topic.
I can weigh in from the perspective of having worked in the United States, where we have the Second Amendment and very, very loose gun laws, and then coming to work in New Zealand, where the gun laws are actually quite strict and more similar to what we have in Israel. And I've got to say, I prefer the New Zealand model. Just to give you kind of a contrast, I have a population that I serve here in New Zealand that's about equivalent in size to the population I served in Oakland in California. And in a given year for that same population, when I was in Oakland, I would do anywhere from 20 to 25 homicides a year, the majority of them by guns. And in that same period of time, with about the same population here, I'll do maybe 2 to 10 homicides. 10 would be a bad year. And maybe one will be by a gun. The majority of others will be things like stabbings and beatings, but not guns. And disproportionately, what I see is not deaths actually by guns that are homicidal, but they're suicides. And so the thing that we have to continue and think about when we're loosening gun laws is it's not just about self-protection, it's self-protection at a cost. And that cost comes with accessibility of a very efficient way of people to kill themselves. And I know that there used to be looser laws with regards to weapons of military in Israel. And then once they restricted the access to the firearms, the suicide rate in our young population, particularly the military age, went down. So I think that there is something to be said for the fact that we cannot ignore that easily accessible weapons can be used in families for people to kill themselves, and also obviously to kill their spouses, that it can be used for violence against people in the family, not just their wives, but also children.
Thanks, Dr. Judy Melanek, for that insight. I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in today. By listening to this podcast, you are a witness. Giving women's voices your attention means giving them power. If you, like us, agree that women's perspectives are essential to the Israeli narrative, subscribe to the Voices of Women at Wartime wherever you get your podcasts, and encourage your friends to listen and subscribe too. And if you have thoughts, questions, or comments, we'd love to hear from you. So reach out to us on social media, on the Center for Women's Justice page, wherever you use your social media.
Thank you, Rabbi Scott Kahn, for the recording and editing. I'm Rivka Lubitch, and I was here with Rachel Stomel. Be well and stay safe.